Don't forget to subscribe to Basement Tales. Just go on Apple, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts and hit that subscribe button. We release a podcast every Thursday. That way you'll be sure not to miss an episode. Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it. You know, you're an incentive guy, Sam. I guess we can start our show with this concept that you're an incentive guy and people respond to incentives. And Charlie's Sandra's a nice person. Like, we're just money grubbing people who respond to, well, I get, yeah.
Well, this is an interesting subject.
Right? Yeah.
Well, we were doing some grubbing and we gave a loan to someone to help them out with an estate. Okay. And she was supposed to renovate the property. And she started renovating the property and got delayed. And then she got killed, which was terrible. And
unrelated to Charlie, I hope.
Yeah. No, okay. It was tragic. She was shot by her boyfriend.
Oh, no.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah, she was like a 60-year-old lady.
Always the boyfriend.
Yeah, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Men suck, obviously.
I watched enough Dateline. Now I know.
This is a Dateline story.
It's a Dateline.
So she had closed with a title company that she happened to work for. And we won't tell you the name of the title company, but she did work for him. And, we thought that's a problem on our loan, so we'll foreclose. So we foreclosed on our loan, and it was a small property. We went down and saw the property, and we were on our way to the foreclosure and got a call. Hey, no foreclosure. There's someone contesting it. They say that this lady was not just a single personal representative of the estate. There's another one that they didn't disclose to us. And you can't foreclose on the loan. And so we stopped the auction on the very day that we were there to do it. It was a pretty rough house, and it's more or less just a lot. And it wasn't enormously expensive, but I don't know, Charlie, what's it, like $100,000 loan or something?
No, I think the loan was $50,000.
$50,000 loan.
God, it was like one of our smaller loans.
Okay. So fast forward to, hey, let's get this settled. The title company immediately called us and said, you know what? We're just going to pay out 100% of our claim if we can just be
excluded. I'm sorry. The loan was $25,000.
$25,000. The title company called and said, hey, we'll send you the full amount of your payment. We're not going to even ask you any questions. We're just going to send you the $25,000. And we said, okay. And so we took their insurance payment. So the title insurer was out of the picture, leaving just the title company, the estate, and the property, and us in the picture. So we wanted to see if we could either foreclose on it because we still held the note, or come to a settlement with the estate. And here we are negotiating today. It's been like a year, and we're still talking to the estate. The title company says they had no obligation to research the proper ownership of the property and who had control of it. So they don't really owe us the money, and they don't owe us attorney's fees. They don't owe us any interest. And we're like, why? Why would that be? And other than being just made up, I can't think of any reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think you explained it pretty well. And the thing is, if you're hiring a settlement attorney to basically help you put a lien on a property or transfer a property from A to B, I mean, it's no different than a person selling a property in a way than mortgaging the property. And if it's somebody off the street who says they're Tom Jones and the property is actually owned by Tom Jones and Martha Jones, you know, that person has to verify that. I mean, it's pretty standard obligation, I would think, of a settlement attorney anywhere. So they, in addition to a title problem, right? They didn't convey good title, and then the title insurer is implicated. They've committed malpractice, one would think, if they have any obligation to deal with that. And what's crazy about this one, it's like Charlie said, it's only $25,000, but to do the foreclosure is not cheap. And I forget if there was more than one foreclosure or a couple fits and starts. So that caused a lot of attorney fees. And then because the estate sued, well, then you have to defend the note, the validity of the note. So that's another attorney. So now there's more attorneys and interest than there was of the original note.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting things, I guess, too, for our listeners is the cost for these things are fairly similar. So your cost to deal with a $25,000 note is not a lot different from a $250,000 note or a $500,000 note. There's some scaled costs with the foreclosure and that, but it's not all that far off. But it doesn't make it any less recoverable. And the scenario we were talking about when we got on the phone is, well, why is the attorney for the settlement company not trying to settle this for a reasonable sum? Because the more this is not settled, the more the attorney's fees go up, and attorney's fees are collection costs that are recoverable. So I was about to say before about incentives. We started all this talking about incentive. This lawyer is getting paid probably by the errors and omissions professional liability insurer. And is his incentive for this case to settle?
No.
You know, it's and insurers have done a lot. I used to work for insurers. They've done a lot to try to deal with that incentive structure over the years. You know, they try to do capitation sometimes. So they'll say, if a suit comes in, you get paid $5,000 to defend this suit, whether it's over in 5 minutes or 5 years. And we'll give you 200 suits like that. And that didn't work out very well, because then the incentive is just to settle everything and pay too much money. So it's incentives in real estate are critical, and usually they align. I mean, usually people's interests align. If somebody's selling a property, they want to sell it. Somebody's buying a property, they want to buy it. Well, there you have, and they come up with a number that's acceptable to each side, and everybody's interests align. But when you start getting into these sort of ugly fights, you get people, well, let's say lawyers is probably a short term for it. You get lawyers who maybe don't have the right incentive to resolve these things. And
Charlie was at one this week. He spent a whole day in a court battle in Spotsylvania County.
This is one of your lawyers, you're saying?
It was an unlawful detainer lawsuit that had gone on for 3.5 years.
Oh.
And so one of the things they were questioning was the validity of the trustee sale. So I had to go and testify on the validity of the trustee sale. And the way it worked was that it was a rural property. Property was probably, the time was in 2017, November 2017. It was a rural property, probably worth about $195,000. That was what the ARV was. And there were 4 bidders that showed up to the foreclosure auction. The people bought it in 1998, but the foreclosing loan amount was in 2001 or 2002 for $60,000. And so the bidders didn't realize that it might have been a first trust. They all thought it was a second trust, so nobody bid. So the bank took the property back at, like, I don't know, I think the opening bid was $68,000 and change. And so these people in the process of, so then the bank ended up taking the property back, and then the bank had to evict the occupants. Well, one of the things that the occupants said is that because the house was worth $195,000, and the bank took it back for 68,000. That shocked the conscience of the court. So that price was too low, and that the bank shouldn't have taken the property back. And these guys have been resting on that argument, and they put it as part of their eviction lawsuit. And so they made this go on for 3.5 years.
Wow, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because even if say the bid had gone up to 150, the bank still would have got that money, wouldn't it? It's not like the money, or would they have gotten some of the money back if it had gone high enough?
Well, that's the whole thing. The bank took it back, but the problem is that this is a rural property. So the people, you have well and septic issues. It's very, very occupied. It hadn't been updated since 1998. So you've got almost 20. Well, the foreclosure was November 2017, but you've got all kinds of issues. So that could easily, even if somebody bought it at $70,000, and let's say the septic system needed to be replaced, I mean, that renovation could have easily went up to about $80,000, $90,000. And so it's a rural property that has a hard time selling. So who knows, it might be break even at best.
5 years, the occupants didn't pay a mortgage or rent.
Yeah, 5 years. So they didn't pay mortgage or rent for 5 years.
Well, and along the lines of what you're talking about, you buy a place like that and you end up having 3 years of litigation to evict somebody. So that's another risk of foreclosures. When you're buying these things, you're not entirely sure how easily you're going to actually get the property. So you were working as an expert, Charlie? You're an expert witness on this one?
Yep.
No, not for fee on this particular one.
Yeah,
So what in those cases where someone's in a house for 5 years and hasn't paid rent or mortgage? Who usually ends up, having to pay?
A good question. Yeah.
Who pays?
Who pays? What have you guys seen? I mean, who ends up?
Always the bank or the buyer. The buyer.
Yeah.
So whether the bank bought it back at auction or whether it's a third party bought it back, that's whoever's holding that note.
So the person that's in the house is just getting away with 5 years of rent-free.
So that's the other thing, is they were saying, because the bank got a windfall, they're acting like, the bank got paid back. But the bank didn't get any windfall because the bank can't collect on their debt yet because there's an occupant in the house. And by the way, the bank's been paying taxes and insurance on that house for 5 years. So the bank keeps having what we call leakage costs. They keep having to spend money without getting any income, right? And so, by the way, what ended up happening was the bank won a judgment for 40 months and 21 days of rent. Plus, Ed, you'll be appreciative of this, they won attorney fees.
Really?
Of which they'll collect an absolutely nothing.
Right. And so the reason why they're happy with that judgment was because in order for the current occupant to appeal it in appeals court, they would have to put up a bond for like $65,000. So, the likelihood of that happening is probably slim to none.
Right. Well, so actually, I was surprised at first when you said they recovered attorney's fees, but it does make sense. It's sort of like the other situation where the note allows them to recover attorney's fees, although
25%
foreclosure. Yeah.
In this case, they were allowed, the deed of trust, I think, had a provision in there that provided for 25% of attorney fees of the debt. Now, the argument on the other side, what the other guy tried to do was he tried to say that the deed of trust does not survive the foreclosure auction.
That's what I was sort of wondering, because it just for our listeners, there's something called the American rule, where if you have a suit, normally you can't get your attorney's fees for it. Somebody, I don't know, your lawnmower service doesn't show up and you have to sue them to get your money back, but you don't get your attorney's fees back. So a lot of times, well, you're not going to sue them. You're going to spend more on attorney's fees and then the recovery. But the American rule can be modified by agreement. So everybody who's listening who's got a mortgage, their mortgage says if you don't pay, not only do you have to pay penalties and interest, but you also have to pay attorney's fees. But as an aside, the reason I guess they call it the American rule is in Great Britain and a number of other jurisdictions, you do get attorney's fees if you win. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you there, Charlie, but that's interesting. So what they were trying to say was essentially the note was dead and gone. Therefore, we're back to the American rule. You can't get attorney's fees. But the reality was, it sounded like the court said, no, you're fighting over the note. Therefore, attorney's fees are recoverable.
And that's exactly what he said. And that's what his ruling was, is that they could collect like up to 25% of $65,000. And so he awarded $10,500. And so, and plus he knew that these guys have been in there for 40 months and 21 days of the foreclosure sale. The judge knew that. And he was very adamant when he said 40 months and 21 days of no rent.
Oh, wow. So, but did he issue an order? You said that they owed the back rent?
Yep, they sure
That's
did.
it.
They
That's
owed the
interesting.
back rent and they owed the attorney fees, which, like Sam said, that's like collecting, blood from a turnip. You're not collecting.
Right. But it, like you say, makes it harder to appeal. But that is, I mean, it's all those rulings make sense. Like they're, depending on the state, I think they're called a tenant at sufferance. So that when you foreclose and somebody refuses to leave, they essentially become your tenant, and for that reason, you can sue them for back rent as you're trying to evict them. But anyway, the reason I wanted to mention that again, Sandra asked the most interesting question, which I think is what normal non-lawyers and non-hard money people think is, who pays for this, right? So, like you said, a lot of it's not recoverable. And, I tend to be a liberal, right? I want people to be able to assert their claims and go to court and have their day in court. Well, who pays for this is the bank, right? So, because the bank's not going to be able to recover its losses. But actually, is it the bank? Because the bank's got to stay in business. So the bank passes those costs on, and that goes into, determining how much the interest rate is. Because the bank on an aggregate, if it has 1,000 of these loans, it's got to make enough money to cover the interest or to get its interest back and to make a profit. So all of these costs can tend to push up the interest rate, or they'll do it through fees, late charges that the bank charge, whatever they got to do to recover that sum. So essentially, we all end up paying for it. And so you don't want somebody who has an illegitimate claim to pursue it for 3 years or something in your case, because the end person's not going to get fixed. And of course, banks, as you know from back in the foreclosure crisis, they're not very good at dealing with these things. They sort of sit out there, and it sounds like they didn't find a way to push to make this get resolved quicker than 2.5 or 3 years.
Well, part of it was COVID, right? A year of it was COVID.
Right, of course.
So this would have been resolved in probably 2 years, but still it went on for a long time. And it went from the district court level to, as you know, the circuit court level. And once you get to circuit court with these things, I mean, they take forever.
Right, particularly if there's a jury trial. Was this a bench trial?
No, as judge. Yeah, bench trial.
Bench trial, right. Yeah, just to get on the calendar for a jury trial can take quite a while. And again, this is Virginia we're talking about, which is a pretty, the courts are not that slow, typically speaking, and they'll do things like that. They don't have no problem with saying you owe all the back rent and attorney's fees and pay it. And the process is fairly straightforward. And yet, here you find yourself, if you buy one of these at a foreclosure sale, you got to be ready.
So Sandra,
and this
what's
was
going on with you? How's your rental?
COVID trial. So
catch us
the trial
up.
was in person for most of us, but we had 2 witnesses on WebEx, so they were actually they weren't in the courtroom. They were in WebEx on the screen. So I had this big screen that could see the entire courtroom, and we could see the witness on the screen. And so you had both attorneys going back and forth with the witness on WebEx in person in the courtroom.
Wow. Yeah, that's all of this stuff has changed so much. I mean, I was a practicing trial attorney a long time ago when Post-it notes were sort of the exciting development in courtroom technique. But to have remote witnesses is certainly not common, and particularly to have it at a small, relatively small level like this. But I guess COVID has changed all of this, where we're all now trying these new things. So to have a core, I'm kind of impressed actually out in a rural jurisdiction to do that kind of setup.
So Sandra, what's going on with you? How's your rental? Catch us up.
Been very quiet. Well, no, it has not been quiet. We did get every 2 weeks the biweekly call. So there's evidently a program in DC that you can qualify for payment relief. So I was asked to fill out some paperwork to get some rental payment relief. So we'll see if that works out for them.
Now, has she started relieving you of the rent and not sending it in?
No, nothing like that.
She just asked for some discount paperwork. And how's the lawn care going over there? Did she pick it up?
So that was the first call, and then I was like, okay, I guess that was the biweekly call. But no, a few days later, we got the, is the lawn service done? Like, are you all going to pay for a lawn service? We said, no, we're not paying for lawn service. You need to do the lawn yourself. So that was okay one night, and then 2 nights later, we got. Well, did the landscaper finish all the work they were supposed to do in the backyard? Because, it rained and now I see tire tracks. So.
Oh, tire tracks?
Yeah, there's some tire tracks. And it was like, that's it. Nothing else is happening in that backyard. So.
So you let her know you're leaving the tire track.
The tire tracks are staying. Some grass will grow in tire tracks and that's it.
And how about, what's she cutting the grass with? Do you have to provision?
Her teeth? I don't know.
Well,
Fred Flintstone mower. I don't know. I'm going ad on them now.
Is someone going to go?
I'm going to become mean landlord now.
Is someone going to go look and see if the grass is high?
Someone like whom?
The landlord.
DCRA. Well, what about DCRA? Couldn't you get fined for having your grass too high?
That's the next question.
Did you see that house next door to me?
There's a difference. Your house is improved. The burden that they're going to put on you with a properly maintained house is much higher.
What does that mean? Because my porch is not falling off?
Yeah.
But now I need to cut my lawn?
The reason is that your neighbor can't afford to fix their porch, but you can afford to cut your grass.
I can't afford landscaping. I'm done.
Wrong.
No.
Have you ever seen a DCRA fine? And by the way, the place is registered with DCRA.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tenant can make a statement that you've left an unsafe condition with your tire tracks in the backyard. It's just like a $500 fine, nothing to worry about. They'll show up, tag your house with that too.
Because of tire tracks, really, Sam?
That seems a little much. I wouldn't, but I guess the problem is if they do it, then to undo it is going to be hard. They might not do it.
Well, we've been looking at some rental penalties that have stacked up against some on a house on 44th Street. Charlie, how much were those penalties?
$85,000.
Yeah, so they didn't maintain it properly for their tenant.
And they're trying to short sell the house.
So this is a fine for an infraction. I'm going to read it to you, Sandra. This is, according, Ed will enjoy this, code 12-G DCMR 302.4.
Oh, it's a 302.4, is it?
That's a $524 fine. Then the nature of the infraction is failure to maintain premises or exterior of the property free from weeds or plant overgrowth. Weeds?
You say weeds?
Weeds and no one smoking.
They're coming after me in my primary residence then.
Or plant overgrowth in excess of 8 inches. The location is the entire yard. And the description is they need to eliminate the excessive overgrowth by cutting the vegetation. So if you find that it's higher than 8 inches, that's only $524. But that's not with them cutting the grass for you. That's a whole nother thing. Having your grass cut, it's like $1,000 for the DC government to cut your grass. We've paid that before. Remember that house we bought that was burned, and it had the grass fines on it. It had like $1,000 grass fine.
So what? Do I charge the tenant for that $1,000?
Oh yes, this is from the lady who's applying for aid. Hey, you
Yeah,
gonna
so
get
they'll
that?
have an extra, 3 months of rent that they can use to, pay these fines.
I think what I would do is drive by, and if the grass isn't cut, I'd send them a letter. So you're not complying with the lease.
Okay.
Well, and
So
that
you
you
got to
could
go.
you could send right. The scenario there is you might send a lawn mowing service and say it costs you $50 or $75 or whatever. Send them that bill.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
see what happens there.
So you can control it before you get the 302.4.
Okay. Avoid the 302.4.
And,
Gotcha.
and of course, I was joking when I said, oh, the 302.4, because there are so many of these things you would never know. And so if you get on the wrong side of a government, whether it's DCRA or anybody else, they can start hitting you up with all sorts of fines. Nobody's going to be out there with a ruler either and be like, oh, the grass only 6 inches high, so we're not going to fine her. You get your 8-inch grass fine, and then you're going to get your tire track fine. And
Yeah, that might be a 305.6. Oh, that's a bent door frame. There's a lot of different ones you can look up and find your choice.
A bent door frame. That's a
there's all kinds of ones.
I could get it.
Your lumps could have been covered in a 302.1. That's removal of trash, bulk items, or yard debris.
That could be
Or
yard
refuse.
debris. It got grown over. Yeah. Lumpy lawn.
You could have a 302.1 and a 302.4.
What happened with the lumpy lawn? Is it still lumpy? That was on a prior show.
It had lumps and it had dips.
Oh.
We paid a company, to come out and to, fill in the divots and, reseed the lawn and all that. So the grass is growing in, but I think there's just, an area where there was no grass that looks like tire tracks. That it's not like a dip in the lawn. It's just, tire.
Yeah.
The grass is not grown in yet.
That doesn't sound like anything could go wrong here. So we'll just follow up again in a couple.
It's not going to go wrong. They're going to stop calling me about this.
You got to get a 20 ENF -HOUS.
What's that?
What's that? It's got letters.
That's the notice for the house. It comes. Your 302.4 comes on a 20 ENF.
Okay.
Yeah.
How because you've had a lot of properties in DC, Sam, how often do they actually find people for this stuff?
When the tenant calls and says, hey, my landlord's not taking care of the property. But the high grass,
the neighbor calls.
The neighbors you'll get the fine for the high grass with the neighbor calling. But the other, when she has them come in and find out some peeling paint, that's when the tenant calls.
And then of course, if you have, I know you guys always use licensed contractors and pull permits because it's the right thing to do. You get the proper work, but I gather they're pretty aggressive. If they see any kind of work, somebody can literally stop from the city and say, where are your permits?
If the work's going on, yeah.
Yeah. And what's a fine like for doing unpermitted work in DC? Because usually you guys have to take over for property that you've inherited.
Well, for each violation, it's $5,000.
Wow.
So you make a window too big, it's on. You have the plans, but then you do beyond the scope of work. Each violation is $5,000, or if you don't have plans, it's $5,000 for each permit. I don't know. The numbers are big. The numbers are real big.
And then they can red tag you, right? They slap.
Oh yeah, then you're stopped. Yeah, that's it. No more activity.
I'm sure that's easy to get
basement
lifted.
Tales. This is horror. This is tales of horror now.
Yeah.
Well, if you categorized our various shows, I'm trying to think how many. Maybe we need to focus on having a happy tale of and. I don't know, it reminds me back when I was a partner at a law firm. You'd work all year long. You'd feel so put upon and all this work and difficult clients, and you'd only get, sort of like a minimal payment each month because it's truly a partnership. You get paid on how well the firm does at the end of the year, talking about incentives, and you get the true up at the end of the year. And as my partner said, he always felt a lot better once the true up came in, once it was all over and the year's money came in. He's like, okay, the last 11 and a half months of complaining, probably I shouldn't have done that because it all worked out. So for you guys, it's when you get one of these properties, you deal with all these fines and all this stuff and you sell it. That's the happy tale. I mean, when you get the payment at the end, you must have this once in a while. You wouldn't be in business.
There's some happy tales.
Yeah. So
I think we're gonna have to save them for another one. We'll have to think of the happy tales.
Yeah. No,
that doesn't go well with basement
in that
tales.
house that you have over there on wherever
on S Street.
On S Street, got some happy tale in that one.
Yep. We got some tale on film.
That's
Someone was happy. Someone was not so happy.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Who knows? He's probably happy.
Well, the problem for Sandra is going back to her story. Her happy day, I think, is going to be someday selling this property, right?
Well, that thing is going up in value.
Oh yeah,
that's the point.
Sell it next week. She'd be happy.
It's on fire over there.
I feel no solace in the fact that I have a 6-month lease. You guys have made me feel like that just was a waste of time and effort.
Yeah.
To have a 6-month lease, other than I can kind of, scare them a little bit with it.
Well, maybe she'll stay longer.
Maybe I don't want her to stay longer.
Maybe
this to end, and I can raise the rent by some reasonable amount.
Get her on the way.
Yes, maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Well, let's just keep it at a voluntary move out.
That would
keep it there.
That would be
nice, peaceful, voluntary move out. So 6 months actually could be kind of good.
It could all work.
Well, maybe you guys will be used to each other.
Not past the growing season, weed growing season over there.
Well, but maybe after they've trained each other and they'll be used to each other, and you'll be at a like an armistice, like a military armistice, and you say, all right, it's the devil we each know, and then you go forward. I mean, that's always possible.
I'm too old for this, Ed. I'm too old for it. Don't want it.
That's not the spirited investor that we thought we were selling the house.
I see myself on a beach somewhere.
Well, they have those. You always get those postcards saying, "Are you tired of your rental property and want to sell it to us for way less than it's worth?" Well, I guess they leave that part out at the end, but so you could always dump it with the renter in it.
No, I'm not dumping it. That's not going to happen. That won't happen.
Sam and Charlie.
Does it sound like a distressed sale, Charlie? Should we buy this house?
Speaking of, that's a good reminder. I got a call earlier today from somebody that's got a rental in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I'm supposed to make him an offer on it today. And I was like to the guy, he's not very motivated. Just like nobody seems to be very motivated. He's like, well, and I know this is why he's not motivated. I said, well, how do you want me to make you an offer? He goes, I said, do you want me to email it to you? Do you want me to meet you on it? Do you want me to text you about it? He goes, oh, just send me a text with your offer and I'll see what I think. So that's what the motivation is right there. But at least got to put together a
text offer.
Huh?
Well, please reply yes if you would like to close next week. No if you'd like to never talk to me.
Usually it's don't talk to me again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, right now you would think there's a lot of people who are not happy dealing with leases with all the COVID stuff, and have we seen? Is there any relief for it? Again, we were talking about incentives and who pays for things. So there's all these things saying you can't kick people out for COVID, which is completely understandable. But what about a landlord like Sandra who's got to still make her mortgage payment? Is there any relief in any of these COVID bills for the landlord side of things?
I haven't seen anything. I mean, this is the classic. Well, you've got to figure who's going to get squeezed, right? Either the landlord's going to get squeezed or the bank's going to get squeezed. So right now it's the classic landlord squeeze.
Well, and I guess, right. So I guess that's the thing is the landlord can get forbearance from the lender and so not get foreclosed on, but they're going to end up owing those payments with interest at the end of the loan or however the forbearance works out. That's people are not going to be too thrilled about that. I had to give 6 months or a year worth of free rental on the one hand, and on the other hand, all of my all of my loan payments to the bank are still ultimately going to come due. I get no relief. Huh.
Have we not heard that the tenants will be responsible for this rent at some point?
Well, I think they are. I mean, I think technically they are, but the problem is, how do you get the money from them?
How you collect it?
Because
Right.
you can't collect it. So if the person's like, well, either I'll stay here and I'll start paying you rent again, and we forget about the old rent, or more likely they'll either stay or they'll just do it. They just leave. And are you going to be able to proceed back to the attorney fee comment for 6 months even worth of back rent? Are you going to be able to get an attorney to deal with that and go after him? You know, maybe, but do they have those assets? So even if they sue and you win and you have to fine them to issue the thing, a lot of landlords are just going to, again, from a personal landlord like you, or a middle-sized group of 5 or 10 or 20 doors, they're just going to let it go. And then the new landlord will be like, hey, I'll take you. You had trouble during COVID. I mean, who hasn't had trouble during COVID who has a normal job and a normal income? So it's not like I'm not going to take you as a new renter because you didn't pay your rent during COVID. You know,
There's a program, but there is this program in DC, so maybe that's the bridge. So DC is offering to pay landlords if they will cease the eviction process. So one of the
okay.
questions says, if you are, planning to evict, do you agree, check here, to not evict this person if we pay you back, rent. So they're going to pay back rent as well as, rent that is due in the next 12 months, I think. So it's a great program. I would imagine if you can get access to it, or, you qualify for it. Yeah.
That is good. We've had some success with a couple of subsidy programs, but it's quite a lot of work and then it is not bridge. They say it will bridge everything, but then in the end, the check comes, it's a lot less. Which brings me to my final thought on being a landlord is Eddie Murphy's great presentation on Saturday Night Live, where he said, kill my landlord, slip in his window, break his neck. Then in his house, I start to wreck. Got no reason. What the heck?
It's a classic.
Thank you, Sam.
And Sandra feels much better now with that suggestion.
Yeah.
Great way to end the show.
All right, next show. First of all, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next show, which we're going to have some really positive resolution where somebody makes a lot of money from real estate. We're going to have a whole week to think about it now.
Okay, the basement tale it's not going to be. It's going to be a ground floor tale. We're not going to go all the way to the basement.
I think a basement tale can have a happy ending. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I don't know. Whatever it is, we'll come up with a name for it too. So hit subscribe. Don't miss it. Next week, a happy tale.
Let's not call it happy endings.